Hey, everybody, thank you so much for checking out a Loadbang Power Chat. It's been a little bit since we've done these. We took a few months off and are really excited to get back to it this time with Erin Rogers, a incredible composer, performer, improviser, a person who it feels silly to put any one of those things as a descriptor because it feels kind of incomplete. We are presenting a piece of Erin's that she wrote for us a couple years ago called Golden Parachute, which we'll talk about. We're playing that on our show, which is January 15th at Opera America. Erin, thank you so much for being here and taking 30 minutes to chat with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Andy, and thanks everyone in Loadbang. It's a pleasure to be here, and all of you out there. Hello from Western Canada.
um, I wonder if we could just talk. I'm curious about like early development, like musical development, um, because it seems to me like when I think about you and your work, I think kind of equally of like Erin, she's a composer. Erin, she's a saxophonist. Erin, she's into experimental theater. Erin, like she does all of these things and at such a high level. Um, as you were developing or as you were kind of growing musically, did you find that those things all grew together, or like what happened first and how did these things kind of lead into one another?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I didn't grow up liking contemporary music in particular. I played a lot of Chopin on piano, and was kind of really into classical music and but then I started playing saxophone, and this instrument's a young instrument, relatively speaking, and a lot of the repertoire that we played was just modern French repertoire that required a lot of extended techniques and a lot of sounds that were pretty unconventional. Um, so I think over time, a lot of us can say this as performers, that you spend a lot of time listening to yourself in the practice room, probably more than you do anything else in those formative years, in those practicing years. And so I started to get these sounds in my head in a way where you're trying to develop them, but you're also listening to them just conceptually as sounds, sounds themselves, physical sounds. And so when I started composing, it just made sense to start including sounds, physical sounds that I'd heard in my pieces in a way that I felt was musical, because that's how I'd been sort of playing saxophone. And of course, when you're playing with a lot of these sounds, you're trying things out. And I think that also led a little bit to the improv, um, the sort of path of improv that I took. I didn't really start improvising a lot until, I guess, grad school, which for me is 20 years ago now almost. So it's been a long 20 years of improvising, but that's how you grow that practice too. And when I moved to New York, I started in Canada, went to Ohio, and then moved to New York in 2005. It just, the doors came open, and I met Paul Pinto at a concert randomly, and he invited me to jam at a local place, ABC No Rio, which was, now I'm long gone, but I got to improvising with that group and to using more than just the instrument, more than just my own instinctive toolkit, and started experimenting with voice, experimenting with space and sound, and sort of in a more compositional way developing pieces, and with groups, blending, sort of creating chamber music on the spot, but not chamber music really. It's just its own thing. So through that practice and developing of that, I've moved into the sort of electronics. I think is probably the latest thing that I've really brought into my own world of improv, composition, everything. So for me, it's all been about the sort of long evolution, and the connecting of the dots is pretty clear when you look back now.
So when you uh, now when you get a commission that comes in, because you have a lot of ensembles around you that you can sort of as a member just collaborate with without having to wait for a commission to show up. When you get something like a load bank commission, where do you start? You have all these different avenues for where you can enter your musical realm. Is it project by project? Do you have a method for where you begin?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so it's almost always about the players for me. It's just knowing what the players do, how they play, what they like, sort of the things I enjoy watching or thinking about when I watch them play. And with Load Bang, it was very clear. It's like these are four people I enjoy seeing on stage, and I want to see them, sort of doing more than just playing their instruments, head in stand, head in music kind of thing. So it, made sense to add a little bit more to that piece. And I know that this Sunday, that stage, that quality of the theatrical qualities that you all bring to your performance practice will, they serve the piece so well with Golden Parachute. And it's, I think, I mean, it's not primarily a theatrical piece. Almost all my music is primarily audio sonically based. And that's kind of what I try to always do is make the music interesting, and everything else is sort of expands from that. So it's not primarily about the story and then it's sort of soundtracked or underwritten. It's about the sound qualities and music and the ensemble first and foremost, and then anything kind of on top of that is just it's just kind of icing on the cake.
Mm.
So I'm really curious about an aspect of your career and how you approach it, because I think that as we move towards like new models of music making and what careers look like, especially in new music, you have your own solo career and then New Thread, Thing and Y, Various Speed, Hypercube, and Popama. And am I maybe missing a group or two?
Well,
So
just to
yeah,
be I'm actually not a member of Verispeed. Thingamai is very connected to Verispeed, and we've done a lot of work with them. I
okay,
performed a lot of the Robert Ashley pieces that they've uh, produced, but I honestly, Wild Up is another group that I play pretty regularly with now. That's a West-based group in LA, and yeah, and then I do the freelancing, so which
yeah,
is as we all do. So yeah, my calendar's full, and as a saxophonist, I mean, you may all take this for granted because you play instruments that are a little older and a little bit more there's more repertoire written for them. But Christmas comes, that holiday season, this time when a lot of people are celebrating different um, in different festivities, and saxophonists aren't the first call. In fact, I don't think I've had a holiday gig in years, and so the music I play doesn't get kind of called for a lot of the you know basic church gigs, gigs that are more traditional. Wind band, we get called for wind band now and then, but I felt like if I was going to make a goal as a contemporary saxophonist, that I needed to create my own chamber ensembles and groups. And because there are enough of them, it can sort of fall into a calendar in a way where I'm busy enough. And some of these groups work project to project, some work more regularly, like there's a monthly rehearsal schedule and a more regular meeting time frame like that. But for the most part, all of them fit together because I'm I'm scheduling them as things come in, and you can do that with the groups you get. For the most part, it works. Every once in a while, you have to turn down something you really want to do. Um, but the older you get, that's not as precious either, right? You start to be able to release this idea of, oh, this would have been a great opportunity, but I missed it. It just, you start to get used to that feeling a little bit. Um, and the other thing I really like about it, that's sort of the more logistical, kind of practical sense of it. The other thing I really like about this sort of varied range of projects and range of groups is that I'm constantly doing something different. And I think as a musician, and an artist, that has to keep me going. I mean, the art and the process is really the thing that I find most interesting. The challenge of writing a new piece is really fun. Writing for a group I haven't written for, players I don't know, kind of figuring out what they do well and diving into that in in a way where I'm solutions oriented. I'm fixing or finding ways to get something I want in a completely new environment. That's exciting. And then as soon as that's done, I can go into a recording project that utilizes just basic saxophone playing and chamber playing at a high level, right? And that's a challenge to get that back. And then because I'm not doing that all the time, I can kind of move into a sort of a theatrical, more staging type rehearsal where you're working with directors and dramaturgs, and that's really exciting too after coming from something else. So I've learned to really like the variation from project to project, and also from personnel to personnel. I mean, different groups, constantly changing people around you. I get to be around my friends all day, every day. It's always different friends, and so that's another aspect of it. So it's really, for me, it works well, and things seem to flow together well enough that I I feel like I'm lucky to do what I do, and I still love what I do.
Erin, since it's a new year and we're hearing about all the different things that you do, I wanted to hear about what's coming up for you. What are some of the projects that you're really excited about in the next few months, not only as a composer, but also as a performer?
Yeah. So I just finished a piece, sort of double barred and sent it off yesterday for ensemble Decipher, which is sort of a Queens-based ensemble of composers. They play a lot of electronic experimental music. They have a laptop orchestra kind of built in, and they are doing a residency at Michigan State at the end of the month, and they wanted a piece for that. And I'm sorry if there's a lot of kid noise in the background here. I've got some nieces and nephews. Um, I'll try to talk over it. But so this piece is it's an interesting challenge because it's not six chamber players on six different instruments. It's an ensemble that has various things that they do, sort of different performance backgrounds, but none of them as composers that they do actively. They're not, gigging instrumentalists, let's say. So they're also composers in that they have compositional sense about how to put things together, and that is a different thing than performers I find in general. So when writing for composers, I have a different set of challenges, and I like to work within that to create something that is playable, that communicates, that works. The piece I wrote for them is called Telegraph. It has five players on stage, and then the sixth player is actually running sound and sound diffusion in the house. So the sixth player, the ensemble player in this case, is actually controlling the directionality and the spatial aspects of the sound on stage in real time, and that's written into the score. And this is something I've kind of wanted to play with for a while, and I've started to do it, but this was a really great opportunity to sort of take a pile of experimental metals over here into a mic, have the performer playing it in some way, having that localized sound on stage, but also having another ensemble member take that sound and play with it as recorded sound that moves through the space. So there's someone didn't get the memo. Don't leave Anti-Air alone. Yeah, there's also a performer in the ensemble that has a sort of self-contained amp mic feedback setup that sort of moves throughout the rest of the ensemble and plays off of the feedback in the mic here, or a little bit of the distortion that comes through the monitor, and has different relationships to the other performers based on the sound that's being created by this sort of localized mic feedback little unit. And so I'm really excited to see how it works, and we'll workshop it a little bit. But the idea that there's more than just the players and just the sound, there's this other element of motion, and that motion can then track to movement and choreography on the stage that then tracks to the audience is something I'm playing with now. So that's sort of the latest. And like I was saying earlier to these guys, the electronics are the things that the sort of thing that can raise the ceiling in a lot of my work these days. I find like having this element of the microphones on stage, and this element of plugging in electric instruments, synthesizers and guitars and things like that, can create a very different, just a different set of sounds to work with, and also ideas of sound like this. Oh, guys, you have to go. Okay, I'm on a meeting. Okay. Sorry.
It's so fun because we all have there's so many kids in our lives and chaos that it actually feels like much more comfortable. So I was sitting next to a mom feeding her 2-year-old at a Whole Foods the other day with my son, who's 1.5, and she apologized for her son being chaotic, and I was like, honestly, if he wasn't screaming, I'd be uncomfortable. Like life is supposed to be chaotic, so thank you for bringing me comfort. Yeah, so it's great. Please encourage their behavior.
Yeah, they're the most fun. I mean, talk about the best type of energy. It's I come back often and playing with the kids. It's sort of there's a lot of things that I love about sort of working the field I work in, being the artist that that I have strived to be, and then coming back and relating really well to 8-year-olds.
I wonder, can you this is not at all the question I was going to ask you, but I wonder if, like, in your work with Thing New York, the thing that always reads to me about like watching your videos and seeing all the stuff that you guys are doing is there's this like at the core of it, it seems that it's like play and fun. Like it's serious art that you were creating, but it always looks like it must just be such an absolute joy to produce. Um, and I wonder, is that a thing that you all like have talked about, or is it just naturally the way that the group has kind of developed, and that's the type of way you want to be working?
Yeah, I think the people bring that energy. The getting together with Thing and Why, it's always been that way, and it's never been really discussed. Like we have to try to be fun in this piece. The group gets together, and there's so much energy, just very off the cuff, very formal, and very fun energy with each other. And it's the reason that group is able to produce the pieces it does, and also wants to. I mean, that group operates like on fumes. It can, and it does. It's a group that doesn't need a lot. It just needs an idea, an inspiration, and an excuse to get together. A lot of the operas and the pieces that we made during the pandemic were really just us wanting to jump on Zoom and talk to each other and hang out, and that, not hang out to have a therapy session with each other in so much as hang out and tell jokes and laugh, and to just be ourselves, and our true selves, our silly selves. And a lot comes out of that. Our rehearsals are very playful. We have a lot of it's mostly improvising until we get something we like, and then we don't actually have this sort of democratic way of figuring out what we're going to do, or taking votes, or deciding, even based on any sort of method that we've tried over the years to try to figure out, well, is there a method to figure these things out? No, things just happen, and then they're done, and then we do the next thing. So there's a lot of really, really interesting projects and pieces that have come out of that, and we're also drawn to a lot of we're drawn to a lot of things that happen in the world, and I think that's another thing. We like to create music based around what's happening at the time, that we're kind of consumed with, whether it's political, whether it's cultural, whether it's like the environmental, and that also drives a lot of inspiration and thinking, and everyone in that group's a composer. I mean, we're performers, and we come from different different backgrounds, and that's another thing, is the process it's not this process where everybody comes in, a score is handed out, we all read it, and then we play it down. It's not like that. It's sometimes a set of ideas. Someone has a bass line they want something played over, we just talk through it, and then a few hours later we have a set. So there's that very varied process, very crew. It's just yeah, I guess playful is the right way to describe it.
It strikes me hearing you talk. I mean, obviously Will said this earlier, your career, but also these kinds of projects really are sustained spaces of energetic excess. There's profusion, there's dispersion, there's lines of flight. But what strikes me about your music is how focused its musical material is. You have a way of weaving really tight ideas through long strands of environmental interactions. It's like setting up a democratic ecosystem and then feeding it with an idea and watching it ping pong around the space. I'm curious what your writing process is like when you sit down at the desk. How much of it's pre-planned? How much of it is a fixed structure? How much of it is this kind of like improvisational? I show up that day with the idea I want to try, and we're just gonna run with it and see where it goes.
Yeah. Sometimes, I mean, sometimes it's a sound, and you have the idea of the sound, and you have the vision. And I mean, with the Loadbang piece, that's what it was. I definitely heard what and that theme comes back. This theme that starts off the entire monodrama. That opening theme is just something that it's just struck me. It's like these four equal voices in a way, all maintaining a space that's the same yet different individually, and yet it all kind of contributes to this core idea, and like you said, this energy that even when things become tangential and move over the course of the room, the course of the piece, become the further you get from that, you can always go back to it. And that's yeah, there has to always be something, like when I said earlier that despite how theatrical things sound, it's like always about the sonic durational experience that has to make sense. It has to somehow read. I really, really believe in that. I really stick to that idea of the sound creating a narrative, creating a story that makes sense in some way. And so the rest of the pieces are sort of fitting. It's almost like a puzzle. This sound has to happen here. Where's it going to come from? Okay, it'll come from this player. Well, that player's now doing that. So what does that mean for that player? The audience is watching this player do this. That means that their character is now somehow in this position. And it's almost all mapped out in ways that sort of simulate reality or simulate one connected ball of energy. And I think it's a little bit different sometimes. And I don't know if it's just because of the more I've gotten into electronics, the more experimental the sounds themselves have become, that I've had to kind of take a different method to creating pieces. One thing I do often with those types of pieces is I experiment, improvise myself, record what I'm doing, and then listen back, figure out blocks of sound, hear what fits with the sound, blend them. I'll do a lot of like just in a DAW, blending two different sounds together. One might be, the smashing of a household item with like a trombone, like pitch bend. How does that sound? Where's the attack transient? Where's the tail of the sound? What's the resonant quality of it? What's the, those types of things. Getting something like that, thinking, okay, this is a good sound. This might be the main, recurring punctuating moment of the piece. Now, this combined sound. I need two players to do that. How can we make it happen? What does it look like when those two players do it? One's on stage, just always trying to imagine every aspect of what this creation of this sound means in a performative environment, and what that energy brings, what that energy means, and then taking all of that and tracking it over time. So if this sound happened here at the beginning, doesn't happen for 5 minutes, happens again, what does that mean for the storyline? What does it mean when it happens, not until the very end? Is it remembered? In a lot of cases, if it's forgotten or you go too long, then that doesn't read. So it's about always sort of keeping an underlying sense of the formal quality of the piece too, and the energy that that you've created so far. And I feel like that's I'm just going on. It's a very tangential explanation, but I feel like that comes from improvising and from understanding myself how improvisation creates pieces over time too.
You use like 2 or 3 film words in that. Is film? I'm talking about like frames, cross-cutting. Does film have any impact on your work? Is it something that you think about, just like the sort of cinematic approach?
No, I think I use them just in terms of like not metaphors for explaining like audio qualities. I mean, I think in this day and age, we see so much film, right? We just are constantly, looking at so much. And I do a lot of film editing. I do a lot of editing performances and a lot of various types of editing for, whether I'm creating something for my nieces and nephews or just like editing a performance, multi-angle performance. I think about frames in a way that then will inspire how I imagine, staging and different choreography of the piece playing out as well in my own work. So it doesn't, the thing that I think about a lot is the idea that performers up on stage with musical instruments, they're also visibly humans, performers on stage with musical instruments, and that we're not just we're not just in the audience to hear the chamber music. We're also there to experience these players coming on stage, doing a bow, sitting down, performing this piece, standing up, bowing, leaving, and that every little micro action or reaction or glance at each other plays like a story. And whether you're, whether you go to tons of new music concerts or none at all, you still pick up on that stuff. And I feel like humans are sensitive to these things, and they draw patterns and they draw relationships and they derive all sorts of underlying stories from what goes on stage, even if it's just four players playing, Beethoven string quartet. And so all of those being as interesting as they are, for me as a writer or a composer myself, I think about that energy and I think of how the sound sort of is amplified by that energy, or how those like micro movements and ideas can help to enhance the sound or enhance the music itself. And it's a balance, because that kind of writing and that kind of technique can get really it can get tongue-in-cheek and get a little bit on the nose. Sometimes it can become silly. So when I'm going back to it again, like, it just has to always be interesting sonic material, and the rest has to kind of be secondary. If that makes sense.
Erin, I wonder, we should probably talk about your piece for us at some point before we're done. Can you just tell our Power Chat audience a little bit about what the piece is, kind of the origins of it, where the idea for the thing came from in the first place?
Yeah. I mean, I went back to look. It's 2016, which now, I mean, this is 6 years ago, and I know that everybody has a different way of counting the last few years. But I thought it might even be older than that. But when I went back to 2016, I tried to remember sort of what was going through my head at that time. I think I had a lot of, I think that there were a lot of ideas, politically. 2016 is an election year. It's also, it's on the 4-year cycle. It's a leap year kind of year, and Olympic year, all of that. The thing with 2016 was, I think, a lot of, like 2008, a lot of the same things were happening. It felt like a very intense sort of cultural time. And of course, this is pre-pandemic, this is just feeling the energy of the world in this moment. I was thinking back to 2008 quite a bit, and the financial crisis that occurred and the fallout of that, which some of these folks that ran major banks that melted down were still sort of under the microscope, and there was still fallout from that sort of torrential time. And the idea of the golden parachute, of course, is a lot of these bank executives that got bailed out, when the banks got bailed out, gave their CEOs huge bonuses when they left the company. And this is after, going bankrupt, putting the economic system of the entire world in jeopardy. And the idea of this thing existing, this golden parachute, this idea that you could fail so terribly, or your company could fail, and yet you would be saved individually, and everybody else was sort of left in the dust, was really fascinating to me. And so I kind of delved in. There's a soliloquy towards the end of the monodrama that is this vocal soliloquy that just talks about the rules of the golden parachute. Like it almost sounds like tax law when it's read off, in this very stark way of just showing how much thought was put into this in a sort of legal way. A company could do this, and yet it seemed like something like that could happen, as commonly as taxes or something like that. Whereas to me, it just felt like such a sort of kick in the leg, and how these CEOs could have such power over a whole company, and like they could leverage this so that they could never really fail. It seemed so aggressive and so power hungry and power. It was a real is a reflection of where we are, and I think maybe I don't know where we are right now. It's sort of one of these rearview mirror situations, but at that time, after such greed and such like stock market frenzy and so much activity and investing, and everybody was making money hand over fist, for everything to sort of collapse and for these folks to get bailed out, nevertheless, was a real, as I was becoming an adult at this time, really really interesting to me. I guess that's the way to say it. So writing Golden Parachute just seemed like trying to portray 4 characters that were larger than life, that had everything, and that could sort of own the rest of the world. And all the movements in some way or another sort of play off of that. But the interesting thing in it is that the four players themselves on stage have to play with each other, and so there's sort of attitudes with each other. There's the tussling back and forth. There's the leaving the door slamming. There's aspects where they're outplaying each other. It's a very athletic piece in a lot of ways. It's sort of meant to portray this type of character that is, has blown up their ego in such a way that it's what you imagine these folks to be like. And I honestly don't know any bank leaders personally, but this is this was what I was thinking about when I was writing the piece and who I wanted to portray in that way. So yeah, there's multiple movements. Each of the movements sort of try to create a narrative in themselves. There's sort of the exciting movements at the beginning that move into a slower kind of more templative kind of feel that then move into this crazy up and down sort of chromatic and microtonal slides that happen ensembly, and then with different sort of blending of combinations of instruments right to the end. But there's always a repetition element that occurs throughout this piece, and that is also something I think we'll see. I think we'll see another financial crisis. I think that the lessons weren't learned during that time, and frankly, we're probably due for a repeat. Anyway, that's pretty stark and dark and bleak, and so we'll leave that for another day.
Well, we do promise that our power chats are 30 minutes, so we should stop, despite the fact that I feel like we could just continue to hang and chat. We are so excited to be revisiting this piece. I think it's really fun for us to like do the premiere, do a couple performances, and then new pieces come along, and you continue to do all sorts of new stuff, and then you look back through pieces you did a couple years ago, and it's like, oh, this piece was awesome. Let's do that one again. So I think we're in a fun place to revisit it, and we are all different players and people than we were 6 years ago, and so it's going to be very, very exciting. So we are grateful to you for creating a piece for us to play. We are grateful for you for spending some time with us tonight to talk about it, and grateful to people that are checking out this conversation now live or check it out in the future. These are very fun for us. It's a nice excuse to get together and chat with our friends. So Erin, thanks again for doing this. Hopefully we will see many people that were checking out the conversation tonight at the concert. Tickets can be purchased over at our website, or you can just come and pick them up at the door. And we will let you know when the next Power Chat is and who the chatty will be. So Erin, thanks again. Loadbang fellas, see you in a couple days. So thank you all, and we will see you soon.
Thanks all.
Aaron.